Liberation Route Europe follows the path of our liberators, connecting milestones of our shared past and present to understand the lessons of the past and to treasure the peace we cherish today. The 75th anniversary of the end of World War II provided a unique moment to honor veterans and to remember those who lost their lives. Europe Remembers inspires people to remember and to experience the heritage of the war.
We want to have a war that ends all wars.
With our partners, we continue to keep our modern history relevant, especially for the younger generations. Let's remember the past to create a better future.
Good afternoon and a warm welcome at the LRE Conference, the digital version of 2021. It's great that you're all logged in and that you're here with us today, and I'm very happy to welcome you on behalf of the LRE Foundation, the Province of Gelderland and Toerisme Veluwe Arnhem-Nijmegen. My name is Anouk Ellen Susan. I will be your host for the next 1.5 hours, and I can tell you it will be a full program with great experts, great topics. Actually, today it's all about responsibility. Responsibility of inequalities, of sustainability, and of the future generations. And next to me is, if I may introduce you, Remy Prout, and he is the Managing Director of the LRE Foundation. And Remy, I said it's all about remembrance today and also about responsibility. What are your thoughts about that?
Good afternoon, Anouk. Thank you for the introduction. Indeed, it was our idea when we built this conference to talk about how, as a sector, the World War II sector deals with current challenges of today. When you hear the news, you very often hear people calling history as a witness and asking historians to reflect on it. We could see it with the attack on the Capitol in January. You could see it with the curfew with COVID-19. You could see it with the Spanish flu. And you see all these parallels with history. And we know that the past can enlighten the present. And I think this is very interesting for us to look at how do we deal together, museums, historians, municipalities, regions, and so on. And our foundation, of course, part of it. How do we deal with the challenges of today?
So actually that is also looking about today and the challenges and the responsibilities. We have 3 topics today. Can you perhaps give some small insights about that?
Of course. The first one is related to this topic of inequality. And for us, working with history, we always see that the winners can write history. And you have a lot of people, a lot of groups which are forgotten. And we want to highlight a few of them. And we have a great contributors and speakers today to speak about the African Americans in the Army, in the US Army, and the way they are remembered, also the women. So I think this is quite an actual topic when you see what happened with the Black Lives Matter movement, the statues being taken down. So we wanted to reflect on that first. Second point is sustainability and the fight against climate change. How do we work on this topic together as a group of organizations? We are not living in a bubble outside of the world, so what do we do? And we have some great examples today to reflect on this. And the last point is about the legacy, the memory transmission, and the new generations. What do we do together? What should we do? And especially at a time when veterans won't be present anymore. This is a crucial topic for our sector, so we wanted to reflect on that as well.
Okay, so actually, as I said, a full program, lots to hear. And perhaps we now may give the word to Herr Dijkema. He is the Director of Toerisme Veluwe Arnhem and Nijmegen. I think he's very sad not to welcome you in person here in Gelderland, but he has some really nice pre-recorded words to welcome all of you.
Dear friends and members of the Liberation Route Europe, on behalf of Toerisme Veluwe Arnhem-Nijmegen, the Regional Tourist Board, and founding father of the Liberation Route and member of the Supervisory Board, I welcome you. In the first place, we aimed for organizing this forum and expo in the region Arnhem-Nijmegen because of its abundance of World War II heritage. The region was, of course, the main battleground of Operation Market Garden and Operation Veritable. Due to the current pandemic, COVID-19, we aren't able to see each other in this beautiful region. So I hope to welcome you in this region after the pandemic so you can see it with your own eyes.
Thank you very much, Hera. And yes, that would be lovely. I mean, one of the positive things in having a digital meeting is that we are all from over the world today here. So actually, let's have a look which countries are actually represented.
Yes, absolutely. You can see that we have people from North America, from Canada, from the US, but also, of course, in Europe, from the UK to Italy, from Spain to Finland as well. Plenty of participants from Europe. We're very happy, and well, I would say welcome to all of them, and I really hope they will enjoy the program today.
Yes, I hope so too. And if you allow me, I would like to give a very special welcome to the LRE Foundation Youth Ambassadors. It's a group of students from all over the world, and perhaps you know them by the I Remembrance campaign or by the STAR Project Foundation, where they have been part of last year. So may I say hello to all of you, and great that you're joining. I think it's really cool, and I would like also to invite you. If you have questions, please raise them up today. Put your questions in the chat. Yeah, now I can see you. Hi, guys. Great that you're here. And yeah, the invitation is not, of course, only for you to join and to participate, but for everyone being within the conference, all participants. Please raise up your questions. We will try our utmost best to answer the questions live by the experts who are here, and otherwise the LRE Foundation team will do it for sure afterwards. So enjoy this next 1.5 hours. Perhaps I may also introduce already that in 1 hour we will have kind of interaction with each other, and that is with Mentimeter. So if you have a mobile, you can already put it and have a look at menti.com, and the code you can see here or in the chat is 1223489. But I will elaborate on that later on, but just to already mention. So, shall we start with the first topic?
Let's start.
Yeah? It's all about redefining the World War II historical research to heal the wounds of inequality. Our society are experiencing a high level of tension in regards to the balance, or perhaps I should say imbalance, between communities and equality of rights. And also the rise of intolerance and racism is coming up. And World War II history is not really a stranger to this. I mean, we have heard through many stories that show the discrimination during the World War, and also that the discrimination in the way of remembering the groups. And actually, that is not accepted anymore. So therefore, the question is, how can World War II heritage sector tackle the present inequalities, discrimination, intolerance, or the phobia about minorities? And can they? That was what we're going to elaborate. I'm happy that I do not have to answer these questions. I have 3 great experts with me here online. So may I introduce Linda Javier. She is journalist and author from the US, writer of the book Forgotten, The Untold Story of D-Day's Black Heroes. Her work has appeared in many publications, including the New York Times. Congratulations on that already. Hello also to Sebastian Fonck, Dutch historian and author, chairman of the Fields of Honor Foundation and researcher into the role of the Black American soldiers in the Dutch province of Limburg. We will have a talk about that in a minute. And last but not least, Professor Lucy Noakes, Rep Butler Professor of Modern History at University of Essex. And Professor Noakes has extensively researched cultural memory of World War II, and especially the British one, and the role of women. So, very welcome. Great to have you here. Perhaps I may ask you a first question. You only have to do either this or that. My question would be, is mainstream World War II history still white, man, and straight? What is your answer? This or that? I cannot see a direct reaction yet, but I will ask you later on once more. So perhaps, Linda, if we both could start. Your book, Forgotten, about the D-Day's Black Heroes, tells the story of the 320th Barrage Balloon Battalion, a unit of the US Army mainly composed by African-American personnel. And you are the first person, actually, rediscover this story and make it public. So why did you, and why now?
I'm actually not the first one. It was the French government, actually, on the 65th anniversary of D-Day in 2009, who awarded the Legion of Honor medal to one of the men in the book, a man from Virginia. And it was through that ceremony in Normandy that journalists, American journalists, rediscovered this chapter of our history. A lot of us never learned that the American Army was segregated in World War II. We, of course, know about Jim Crow, which is the series of laws in the southern United States that separated the races. But a lot of us did not know about about this chapter, and so it was really thanks to the French government that we wrote about it. I wrote a story, and then I just discovered a lot more when I decided to pursue it more. Actually, so.
You're a journalist, and that I find interesting what your thoughts are. What is the role of journalists in forming, reforming, perhaps also a more inclusive narrative of history?
Well, journalism has been called, the first draft of history. And when I speak about the African Americans of World War II, which I do all the time, including last night in a Zoom presentation, I always ask the audience to think about who are our historians today? Who are the historians recording our present history? And will we have to correct the record later, future generations? And I think that's worth posing the question because we as Americans have had to correct a lot of our history. And, I live in France, and so have the French. The French have been called on to correct many chapters of their own history too, as it pertains often to colonial soldiers and such. So I think it's really important that we think about how we are getting our news today and why it is so important that we support quality news sources that are giving us, hopefully, a correct first draft of history.
Thank you, Linda. There's already a question coming up in the chat. Perhaps I may immediately ask it to you. And it is the following question. Which other groups' roles, apart from African-American soldiers, do you think need more attention?
Which books that pertain to African-Americans? Sorry.
Yes, which target group you think next to the African-American also needs some attention?
As pertaining to military history? Yes. I'm sorry.
Yes, indeed. I think that's the question from the chat.
Well, I have to tell you, there is a big fat bibliography in here. And, really, there are so many excellent books that I used as a base for my book. And I have to tell you that when we look for inspiration, if you're looking for military history, really look here, and you can call it up too. You can also just email me to my website, and I can send you a copy of some of this, the person who had that question. I also think that if you're interested in African American history, what's also very important to do is to look for specific areas in the U.S., like, for instance, the history of Atlantic City, New Jersey, which was the first resort town in the U.S. The history of how African Americans built that city is super interesting, and I use that in the first chapter of my book. And that hits all the marks. That also hits the wars also, because World Wars I and II were very important in terms of African American contributions.
Thank you very much, Linda. And I think your book, Forgotten, should be indeed on the list from everyone looking at it today at the conference. Thank you so much. Please stay. Perhaps another question will raise up later on. Now I would like to ask Sebastian. And Sebastian, before we go into a chat with each other, shall we first have perhaps a look at the video you brought with you. It's the documentary Zwarte Limburgers from 2018, and it's all about the called liberation children born just after the war, after love affairs between Dutch village girls and Afro-American soldiers at the end of the war. So let's have a look at it.
In 1944 werd Limburg als eerste bevrijd van de nazi's. En wat vonden we die Amerikaanse, Engelse en Canadese soldaten toch leuk? Ze deelden chocola en sigaretten uit en dat niet alleen. Ook kindjes werden geboren.
Te leven voor het geluk van hun kind.
Ieder kind vond zijn plek wel, zou je denken. Maar als jij een ander kleurtje hebt, dan ben je wel getekend.
Kinderen groeien op in de beschutting van het ouderhuis.
In Limburg zijn er in 1945 zo'n 70 geboren met een donkere huidskleur.
So, Sebastian, you are closely involved in creating awareness for the Black American soldiers in the Dutch province of Limburg. In Holland, there were 15,000 till 20,000 Afro-American soldiers. Why has this group actually been forgotten?
Well, the most obvious answer is, of course, racism and segregation of the army. I think also very important is our general image of the war. You know, when we think of war, we usually think of combat. And most African-American soldiers, because of racial segregation, served in supporting units. You know, most of those 15,000 to 20,000 soldiers in the Netherlands were operating in logistical operations, operating depots, bakeries, laundries, whatever. In fact, without them, the 9th US Army would not have been able to function. They transported the troops, like I said, did the laundry, made the bread, etc., etc. But that, of course, is not usually a very interesting war story. Combat makes for great stories, but usually forget about supporting units.
When you talk about the stories, I mean, how to tell their stories actually in order to give them a place in history?
Right. Well, first step is, of course, simply acknowledge that they were there, but that is not enough. If you want to really have an inclusive history, you also need to represent their voices. And, you know, let these soldiers speak for themselves or their families. You know, it's not enough to just put a mannequin in the museum and say, okay, they were Black American soldiers. It's just as important as getting their own stories told by themselves. And that's what we're really trying to do right now here in the Netherlands.
So it's a quite actual project also.
Yes.
Okay, well, we will see if there will be a question for you later on, but for now, thank you very much, Sebastian. I would like to head over to Professor Lucky Noakes, and I'm happy that you will tell us about your important research you have been done, since you have extensively researched the cultural memory of World War II, and as I said in the beginning already, about the British one and the role of women. So how are the women in World War II perceived and today in a collective memory?
Well, I'd say women are still relatively marginal to the shared memory of the Second World War in Britain. There's now a memorial to the women of the Second World War in the Mall, the road that runs down by Parliament in the middle of London, that's got the cenotaph and statues to kind of great war leaders and military leaders. And that was erected, I think, at the end of the 20th century. But it's an interesting statue because it's it's not figurative. It has a collection of kind of clothes hanging up on pegs, so war uniforms, factory uniforms, and to me it suggests that these women put on these roles for the duration of the war, but then took them off and went back home afterwards.
And did that actually change in time? That perception?
I mean, I'd say that it absolutely could do, because memory's never fixed, is it? It always changes. There really wasn't very much space for women's role in war until the 1970s and second wave feminism and history, female feminist historians started to research them. So it could change more in the same way that it could change, and I think needs to change, really needs to change in Britain to incorporate more members of the Commonwealth, more people from occupied European countries support with the British. There's lots of groups that are absent or marginal from the British memory of the Second World War, unfortunately.
So when you say, Lucy, it has to change, perhaps my question then would, what can we do actually to improve inclusivity of perceptions, and especially when we talk about the gender and this civilian perspective in narrative World War II today?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think it's something that has to be, it's a kind of, to use a war metaphor, it's a struggle on lots of different fronts. It's something that historians can certainly, we can do better in communicating our research. I think that the British media has a greater role to play. British politicians need to think far more carefully about how they talk about the Second World War. And it's something where there needs to be interventions in lots and lots of different places. Social media, for one place.
Yeah, talking about social media, there has been a question in the chat. Lucy, I would like to tell you, it's from a youth ambassador. Have you found a way to highlight important experiences from a civilian perspective, especially women, in the midst of war that may not always be at the forefront of what we learn about?
That's a really interesting question.
Yes.
I mean, I can research them and I can write about them and talk about them. How many people want to listen to that? I don't know. It's certainly the kind of thing that we talk about at university, and my students are really interested in. Students do some fantastic work on this. But again, I think it's using archives creatively, it's conducting oral history interviews, getting people to talk to their families, and working with museums and other sites where we represent war to make sure that they're as inclusive as possible.
Thank you, Lucy. And I have seen that there has been also a question for Linda. Can I perhaps see it here? Yeah. You briefly mentioned in your book there wasn't much education about segregation in the military. Has there been a shift in recent years? Also a very interesting question.
Well, I think that there's more of an emphasis overall, certainly in the U.S., that we include more stories in our history. I mean, I'm sure that all of you know about the protests that have rocked American cities in 2020. And I think that a lot of institutions in the U.S. are doing a lot of introspection and figuring out how to include more stories. And so I can't tell you exactly what we know in the U.S. these days about the U.S. Army and about the history of the U.S. Army. I hope that HarperCollins is putting this book in schools, but I can't tell you for sure. But I can tell you that there is a lot of interest in the history of African Americans, not as a specialized subject only, but as an American story. And that is certainly why I wrote this book, too. I was quite shocked that I hadn't learned a lot of the stories that are in this book. And I wondered why we should have specialized programs of study in university to learn about our own proper history, because African American history is American history right from the beginning, right before the country was even founded.
Thank you, Linda, and quite active chat, which I'm very happy about. And interesting question also for Lucy once more. Do you think the role of women or African Americans during the war led to increased emancipation in the post-war era?
It's for both. Also for Linda.
But also for the three of you to answer, of course. But perhaps, Lucy, if you would like to start. We cannot hear you yet. You are on unmute. So if you can unmute it again, thank you very much.
Sorry.
Yeah,
no problem. Britain, the immediate after effect of the war was, for women, was very much back to the home, back to domesticity. And really, it's not for another sort of 20 years or so that maybe the after effects of women's experiences of war start to reappear. And I think that's because of the stories that women told their daughters. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, so it takes a little while.
Thank you, Luz. Perhaps Sebastian, what are your thoughts about?
Well, we just saw the Liberation Children of Color, and, they were people who didn't know about that history. They didn't know that their fathers served in a segregated army. They actually thought they were the only ones in the Netherlands who might have looked different. So you really see the importance of validating experiences, contributions, and even the presence of particular people in society, not only on the personal level for these children, but as much for society in general to show, these people are part of our nation as well.
Thank you, Sebastian. May I thank all of you for your thoughts, your wisdom, your topics to mention today. I think you're doing such a great work, and also for raising up a voice, actually, for those who are not always seen, for those who are not enough in the picture, and for those who are sometimes also forgotten, the minorities. I think you're doing such a great contribution. Thank you so much. And then perhaps I may ask Remy, we have heard different topics, different perspectives. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's so interesting to see how now we can progress on speaking about forgotten memories and perspectives. Our work at the LRE Foundation is to try to bring those perspectives together. This is an endless job because there are so many of them between countries, within a country. Here we didn't speak about also the relationship with colonial troops. I mean, as a French, but I can imagine that Lucy would say the same for the UK. You have this tension and these clashes of memory between colonialism and the war. So this is still there, and I think we need more years to go in that direction. But what we've seen today and what we see with other partners in museums and so on, that this topic is more and more important, and I'm very glad about that.
Yeah, I think good to raise it up and important to raise it up, and probably we could talk about it for sure for much longer. But yeah, still something to do, and still important to raise it up, and also to never stop doing that, or?
Absolutely, and I think there were some progresses in the Netherlands. For example, in the last years there was a traveling exhibition about the role of African Americans in the U.S. Army. This is how it goes with exhibitions. You raise the topic and then it goes into the media. It was the same thing in many other countries. I think about the civilians, for example, in Normandy. It was a forgotten group of people, and in 2014 the French president for the first time talked about the civilians in a very important speech at the Memorial de Caen. And I think this, you can see, step by step that we going away a little bit from the mainstream memory into a more, maybe detailed and global perspective of the memory. So, of course, we need time. It takes time, but all those perspectives are coming together.
I think also a good reason to start with that topic immediately in the beginning of the conference. Thank you very much, Remy. We will now go into the second topic for today. So from one responsibility actually to another one. And there we will confront on the one hand, but also we said we would like to raise attention for the climate emergency from a European perspective. People travel across the world by train, by car. I mean, they did it for COVID. They did that after COVID, of course, further on. They go for visiting the beaches at the Normandy. They go for seeing musea having big buildings, using quite a lot of energy. So the question is also a little bit, is there a responsibility for the future? We think, yes, there is, so therefore we need to address the topic. But the remembrance sector has an impact on climate change. And the question is a little bit, it's perhaps not really a really green-oriented sector, or is it?
Well, I'm not here to judge, country by country or museum per museum, but I think, we, as I always say, we don't live in a bubble. We are not, on our own world. We do have a role to play. We have a responsibility, of course, us as a foundation, but all the other key stakeholders in this field. What I think is happening with COVID-19 right now is that we are rethinking a little bit about the way we used to do things. And this is great because this could lead to some changes in the future. And I think when we look back at the past and we look back at what was happening at the liberation of Europe in 1944, 1945, that was a way to try to make the world sustainable. But that was from a very primary risk of fascism, of self-destruction. And now we are a little bit, maybe the parallel is going too far, is a bit far-fetched, but we are also in this decade in this emergency about self-destruction as well. So question is, and I know we have several examples coming up today, but question is, what can we do at our level? And I know sometimes, it can be baby steps, maybe some people can take bigger steps, but what can we do? And I find it very interesting to see all those examples and see when COVID is over, what will we do?
Well, that is indeed a very interesting question. We will start now with different perspectives on how to deal with it. And we start exactly with a really great example in the beginning. And therefore, I would like to introduce Natalie Worthington. Hello, for our online interview, director of Juno Beach Center, a museum which has recently developed a strategy towards climate change and reduction of the footprint of the museum. And Juno Beach Center is probably one of the first and most advanced museums in that direction with such an articulated strategy. So we have a very small video. Let's have a look at it.
In Courcelles-sur-Mer, the JBC proposes to participate in a comprehensive project for sustainable tourism for the Juno sector and put forth the idea of an environmental hub around the entrance to the port with a view to reconciling sustainable tourism, memory, and the environment. The key action word is decarbonize. And so, the JBC started analyzing its greenhouse gas emissions in order to evaluate its carbon footprint, act, and begin a transformation towards a low-carbon model.
Wow, quite impressive. I'm very excited now to know more about. Hello, Natalie, are you there?
I am here, hello.
Hello, thanks for your time you're taking. I'm quite impressed, but also very much interested, actually. Why did you decide to engage in such a kind of process?
Well, the fact that the Juno Beach Center is really on the seashore, we are surrounded by water here. And also, we're very aware of the negative impact of the climate changes, very close to it. Also, we've been thinking, well, the veterans, they fought for freedom, they fought for the world in which we live today. And what are we doing in order to save this world due to the new combats, the new risks, the new challenges that our generations are facing? So with all this, we decided we really grew awareness of what we had to do, and we decided to act.
Wow. What were your findings, and decisions to reduce the Juno Beach Center carbon footprint? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, the fact is that at the beginning, when we started reflecting in 2019, we only had a list of eco-friendly attitudes, eco-friendly actions, but we were not satisfied with that because we felt that if we were going to go this way, we were going to do greenwashing and nothing else. So what we did is that we studied the commitments of the UN Sustainable Development Goals for the world for 2030. And studying those UN goals made us aware of what our national goals are in France. And the national main goal is to reduce carbon 5% each year until 2050. So once we had realized this, we decided to do our own calculation of carbon footprint. And we realized that that was the cornerstone and the way to go for the future. So once we'd done this carbon, this assessment of the Juno Beach Center, of our museum carbon footprint, we did that on the year 2019, which was the best year ever for us because we had over 100,000 visitors. So we did our carbon assessment that year, and we did it with 3 scopes because there are 3 scopes for the carbon assessment, and the third scope concerns the transport of the visitors, which is very, very important. So once we had all this, we had our assessment, we had our goals, our targets, and we were able to build an action plan.
There will be a lot of musea also watching today and being here at the conference. So what actually would you advise them in regards to the World War II museums and the tourism sector in that field of?
Well, the fact is that you've got to understand what sustainable development is first. Sustainable development is not just environment, it's also economy, it's also social matters, and all of this makes it possible for managers of museums like ours to have a real plan, which is a management plan, a strategy for the future. So what I would recommend first is to have this comprehension of what sustainable development is, and to really, what I would really recommend is the assessment of carbon footprint. If everybody is aware of what impact you have on the environment, it gives you the goals you've got to reach. And I would also like people to reflect on two things. The first is that it was about 30 years ago that President Chirac in France was saying that our house is burning down and we are blind to it. So awareness is really the first thing. And I also find a citation in Canada from a Canadian association, and it says, they are fought to protect our land and our freedom, mentioning the veterans, the soldiers in World War II. It is now our collective duty to protect what they fought for. So we've really got to understand that the ball is on our side now.
Yeah. Thank you, Natalie. I saw a short look at the chat if there are some questions, but they are not right now. But thank you so much of sharing your insights and also your experiences with us. Good luck further on, of course. And we will keep an eye on you, how you're going to do things as a good example of to do so. So thank you very much, Natalie. And now, I think it's time to move on towards Joël Stoppels from the Liberation Route Foundation. You probably know him, I guess, since he's the face of the Europe Remembers on Tour campaign. He has been traveling around Europe yesterday I heard from him, he made 50 videos to say. So today he'll make a live report on a region in the Netherlands. So Joël, can I see you? Where are you?
Hello, I'm here now in the Freedom Museum in Groes Bay. I traveled all the way up to here together with director Wil Linders. Impressive museum. Can you tell us something about this unique museum?
Yes, Joël. This is the brand new Freedom Museum. We opened the museum in September 2019, and it's based on 3 USPs, very shortly. We tell the cross-border, multi-perspective story of the Second World War in Europe. Secondly, it's not the Second World War 1939, 1945. No, it's placed in the context of the 20th century. So also the pre-war years and after-war years are shown. And on the third place, we stress the link between history and the present world, because, of course, human rights and democracy are still threatened every day. So this link is very important. You don't leave this museum without this knowledge about this link with the actual problems in the world. So education is focused on knowledge, understanding, and engagement.
And you also created special storylines in the museum. How do you create these storylines?
Yes, we did it together with an international company of historians. And it was the experience we had in the Liberation Route Europe to working together with the colleagues in Europe. And that was the inspiration for this new museum. This new storyline had to be built in cooperation with the historians. So we had a group of 40 historians, Germans and Dutch historians. We had already these cooperations with the Americans, the British and the Canadians. And together we built this new storyline that's unique, of course, because mostly you have your own perspective. And this is the richness of this museum.
And there's also a unique feature in this museum. If you look at the roof, can you tell us something about this?
Yeah, it's a sustainable museum. We're working with solar panels, with heat pumps, and the roof is lifted by air pressure. So the height is 12 meters high. A green museum, which gives unique opportunities for exhibitions, because this height of 12 meters high gives us these possibilities. So we're very proud of it.
And what happened last week here, Wil?
Yeah, we had a challenge, a big challenge with the snow. code, the red code was pronounced. So we knew it was a challenge. It's the first building in the world, the first and unique building. So we didn't have any experience with snow pressure. But we succeeded. There were some problems the first night. Tension was a big tension, but afterwards, no. The technique did what they promised us, so we saved the building.
Amazing. I was walking through the exhibition. It's really impressive. After the COVID crisis, people need to visit the Freedom Museum in Groesbeek. Can you tell us something about this future? What you see this future of this museum?
I'm convinced. We estimated to have every year 80,000 visitors. We didn't reach this in this COVID year. Last year, 30,000 visitors. But we are convinced that there will be a recovery and that people, the visitors, will find this Freedom Museum. Tour operators, but also the individual visitors from abroad, from the Netherlands.
Good answer to close this interview. Thank you, Wil Lenders. We're going to the next location. Back to the studio.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and we are very happy to hear that you managed the challenge of the roof and the climate, so thank you very much. Well, with Nathalie and with Wil, we already touched actually the important topic of the World War II sector and the responsibility for the future in regard of sustainability. And the question is a little bit, how can the travel industry adapt to the slow and to the green trends in traveling? And can they? What do you think, Remy?
Well, of course. I mean, Nathalie and Wil showed that with commitment, with the support also, because Nathalie worked with many external people, scientists working on this field. If you get the support, if you have the will and the political support as well, financial support, then you can make it happen.
I mean, the challenge of the COVID-19 crisis, we have to say, has already shown some examples of forced transformations. And this should make us question also a little bit our habits. And I will talk about this with great tourism experts online, very sustainable. So may I introduce and may I say a big hello. First, very much appreciated by me, since he's a great expert in the field of tourism and also my former boss, Jos Franken. He's manager of director, the Netherlands Board of Tourism and Convention. Hi, Jos, nice to meet you.
Likewise, Anouk. Great to be here.
Secondly, I also would like to welcome Jeroen Drabbe with us. He's director and co-owner of Able Leisure, a Dutch sustainable company and developing concepts based on outdoor recreation. Looking forward to having a chat with both of you, and later on also, of course, with Remy being with me here in the studio. And Jos, perhaps I may start with you. Before the COVID-19 crisis, quite a few destinations, including, of course, our capital, Amsterdam, were facing an ever-increasing number of visitors. And the MBTC Destination 2030 strategy is dealing with this development. So can you a little bit elaborate on what the strategy is looking like and what the main aspects are?
I will. Thank you very much. It's kind of hard to believe that in a pandemic where there's no tourism or travel, that only a year ago, the debate was very much about over-tourism in Amsterdam, as you mentioned, but also outside of the Netherlands. Think of Barcelona, Venice, Dubrovnik, and all these other places. And things changed quite dramatically. The good news is, well before the pandemic, we started a sort of a co-creation process in the Netherlands called Perspective 2030. And I'll give you sort of the top line takeout, because there's quite a few interesting paradigm shifts that were noted down. One of them is to really start looking to the shared interest of citizens, visitors and companies, rather than have a sole focus on the travel or tourism industry in a certain city or region. The second one was to very much look at the net impact rather than just the economic impact. So with net impact, we mean the impact and the balanced impact between economy, social impacts, and ecological impact. So very much sustainability, not just from an ecological point of view, but also from a social point of view. And finally, look at tourism or travel in general, not just as an economic factor, which it is, of course, and an important one at its own right, but also as a mean to various ends. And if you look at this subject of today, for example, travel, of course, can also very much contribute to the general awareness and recognition of all the history and the importance of this history for today. But it also, in a more tangible manner, can contribute to the maintenance and restoration of all these heritage sites, for example. So tourism is more than an economic factor in its own right. It's very much also becoming a driving force and possibly a change agent for other challenges that cities or regions may have.
Yeah, as you already stated, today we are talking about also the World War II heritage. And actually here you can see that the heritage sites in the Netherlands are more and often situated in parts of the country away from Amsterdam. So perhaps can these heritage sites profit from your strategy finally?
Yeah, no, definitely. I would say not so much from the strategy as of what's currently happening. The strategy will very much be focused on a dispersal of travel throughout the country, based on, let's say, the mental and physical carrying capacity of a region, because no region is the same. So you really have to look at the identity and the DNA of a region and decide what kind of place and what kind of destination you would like to be and what kind of guest suits. And maybe also what kind of guests don't. And what you currently see happening as a result of the pandemic, which comes out of every single monitor or research that we're currently doing, is that there's a general longing for space, for safety, for green and natural environments, for clean air, and that in particular suits the heritage sites very much, because this consumer change in their behavior and the way they look for future destinations may very well play into the cards of some of the heritage sites, which can exactly fulfill that kind of demand.
You already mentioned some of it, but the sustainability in the future tourism. So how is MBTC looking at that topic?
Well, sustainability for us, like I just mentioned briefly, is more than the ecological side. It's very much that, of course it is. It's about making choices. For example, let me give you one very concrete example. We stopped active promotion of the Netherlands as a destination in most of the long-haul markets, and focus on the domestic market and the neighboring markets and within reach of car and train within Europe, which is a clear example of the choices you can make at the forefront of what you're doing. But at the same time, of course, we look at, let's say, balancing out sustainability in terms of economic sustainability, ecological sustainability, and social sustainability. And one of the things we came up with is a so-called the state of the destination, where we really sort of follow and measure the KPIs in the social domain, in the ecological domain, and of course the economic domain, in order to raise the awareness of the public and private actors within the industry to start looking at the way they work and act and think from this net impact perspective rather than just from an economic perspective. And the good news is it's really getting traction. We see Perspective 2030 and these strategic guiding principles, if you like, finding its way to more and more regions and cities in the Netherlands, some of them who even literally translate their policies for the foreseeable future based on Perspective 2030, which is great, but then because we start to sing from the same hymn sheet, and that's a great breeding ground for building back better tourism to the Netherlands.
That sounds indeed very promising. And Jos, there is a question for you in the chat, if I may say. It's how do you foresee the future of World War II remembrance tourism after the 75th anniversary of the commemorations?
Yeah, I mean, all the speakers today and yesterday highlight the importance of keeping the history, the memory, the stories, the values alive. And I think, like Remy Pro just mentioned as well, it's important to find new ways to do so, because the obvious survivors are no longer there or hardly anymore. So it's key that we keep investing in meaningful tourism, meaningful travel with a purpose, travel that is more than just consumption, but travel that really make people think and educate them on the sites they visit, the stories that come along with it. And I see a great future, to be honest, because we see a strong demand for more and more meaningful tourism, and we see a strong demand for tourism into these natural open spaces rather than just the classic city breaks in the traditional hotspots. So early days, don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. There's a lot of work to be done. The market forces are strong, reflexes die hard, but I think if the actors behind this commemorative tourism work together from a clear purpose, I think there's a great future for this particular kind of travel and tourism.
Thank you very much, Jos, and good luck, of course, with all your work and the strategy together with the team. Please stay ahead. Perhaps there will be some more questions later on. Now I would like to introduce Jeroen. And yes, Jeroen, the popularity of hiking and outdoor recreation, we just heard it from Jos also, has grown hugely during the COVID crisis. Personally, I have experienced that by myself too. So what are the major trends of outdoor recreation which you can see?
Yeah, thank you. There is we see an enormous increase in hiking in the Netherlands, and especially there are a couple of trends which we see the last few years, and I think Jos already mentioned a couple of them, and one of them is meaningful hiking. For instance, is quite strong increasing, and about meaningful hiking. We mean that's to experience the story of a hike, but also mindfulness, reflection, awareness in a hike. When you see the increase of, for instance, pilgrim tours, we see that, and that's quite huge. And together with that, vitality, health considerations, that's also a part that we see growing in hiking and also in outdoor recreation. Of course, during the COVID crisis, we all had more time to hike and to be in the nature and outside and to have outdoor recreation. So it's obviously it's logic that there is an increase, but the increase is also, and that's especially at COVID, we see an increase in also the short routes from your house in the direct surroundings. Have a short hike, a short experience outside, and that's also enormous. There's also an enormous growth, and with that increase, you see there is starting another problem, and then in the light of sustainability, you see that certain nature spots, nature areas, are so crowded that the government cannot maintain the COVID measures anymore. So what we see now, we have a tool, and that's with sensor technology. We measure on various routes in the Netherlands. We measure how many people are on that route, and that information. And you see that there's an enormous demand for that sort of information. How many people are on a route, and is it possible that we distribute those hikers or outdoor recreation people? Can we motivate them to experience other places, or can we motivate them to come on other times, or things like that? And I think that is, when you look at that from a sustainability point of view, I think that's also quite important when we will protect nature and the rural areas, in not only in Holland, but next to all kind of hiking routes, but also it's also for cycling in Holland. It's similar. It's last year it was so crowded on some spots that you see that they had to close it.
Incredible. There is a Dutch soccer trainer who said in each advantage is a disadvantage. But there is a question in the chat, perhaps I can go to that one, because we are actually in the middle of the COVID. But what do you think? And that's the question from the chat. Do you think there will be the increased popularity, or is it a temporary thing?
I think it will stay, because when you see the meaningful part of meaningful hiking, meaningful outdoor recreation, that was not a demand that we have seen this last year. It started for a couple of years now to experience hiking tours and storytelling in a hike, and then I think so. What will stay, and I think what's also an advantage, as far as we can talk about advantage with COVID, is that people are also, when it comes to hiking and it comes to outdoor recreation, some people discovered how wonderful it is to hike, or to be outside and to do outdoor recreation. So I think the group has grown from this discovering, and what we learned from this COVID crisis is. And that's really in, I don't know the English word of it. In Holland we say stroomversnelling, but it went faster. That's the distribution of recreation. And I think especially in Holland, that's because we are in Holland, of course, we're a small country. Germany and it's something else. But I think that is what in the future will be at more places. How can we distribute our recreation, so well economically, also from the sustainability point of view, throughout the tourism and recreation areas?
Thank you, Jeroen. And please also stay online, because there might be some questions in a second. Remy, you just heard what Jos and what Jeroen said, and there is a question: will sustainability become a topic for the LRE Foundation?
Well, of course it is. It is essential for us, for our reflections. Jos is looking at 2030. We're looking at 2025. We are a bit more modest in the time scale, but we have developed a system of trails based on hiking and later will be cycling trails to follow the Liberation Route Europe, meaning that we try to connect sites like museums, cemeteries, memorials, and so on, and connect them with hiking trails or cycling trails. One of the things that I will and I connect with our work in what was said by Jos and Jeroen is meaningful tourism is essential for us, because it's you don't go to a World War II museum or a cemetery to have fun. And when you go there with your kids, for example, is to show them the history and to try to pass on a message that you have, and it's very educational, it's very meaningful. Second point is the local approach as well. I think it's local in the sense of what is around your home. We see that many people, when we talk to them, say, "Oh, do you know about this museum next to your home?" Yes, I know about it, but I've never been there. And it's really the case. It was the case for me when I started to work for the LRE Foundation. I realized that I'd never visited the museums near my home, and I blame my parents for that. But it's true that this local history is something that we can tap on and say and tell the people, look, there are hiking trails, cycling trails to go to the museums around yourself and to talk about this local history, which is also your history about your family, and this is the connection with your own past. And the last point is that I think, especially for this topic, not just for tourism in general, that this slow tourism approach is a way to better integrate what you learn in a museum. I've done a lot of hike myself along the Liberation Route in the past year, and every time I was getting out of a museum, out of a cemetery, or out of a monument, I had the time, because I was walking at a slow pace, I had the time to, let it sink in and think about what I saw, think about what I learned. And that really improved my learning and my experience. Well, if you go in your car, you go fast. Oh, we need to go to the supermarket for tonight and so on. And then you forget and you move on too fast. When you walk and when you cycle, you have the time to let it sink in. And I think this is a great value of these hiking and cycling trails that we are building.
So actually next to the hiking trails, which is coming soon, the cycling trails is the next project.
Of course, and we started with hiking because it was there and it is there. So many hiking trails everywhere in Europe. Of course, in the Netherlands, you have cycling tracks all over the country. So I'm not talking about the Netherlands. I know the two other guests are looking at the Netherlands, but I'm looking at the whole continent. And in other countries, it's a bit less of the culture to have those long distance cycling routes. And this is something which is being built, and you have a European Cyclists Association working on that very hard with a lot of organizations in Europe, and we want to work with them to also connect those routes to the Liberation Route Europe. So there will be hiking, cycling, and the idea is how can you travel and experience this route by yourself physically, and I think it's even more rewarding than when you walk 30 kilometers to get to a museum, then you deserve it, and the experience is even more interesting and meaningful.
For sure. Thank you very much, Remy, for your reflection on that. Well, gentlemen, I see there are no further questions, but I would like to thank you very much for joining the conference and for sharing with us your topics and your insights. So thank you very much. Jos, Jeroen, Remy, thank you. Now I would like to give the word to Massimo Turchi. He's a historian and president of the Gothic Line Association Memory Lab. And he gives some answers on slow and green tourism in Italy. So have a topic becoming much more important and also interesting during COVID-19. So Massimo, may I give the word to you?
Le storie, chiamiamole delle valli, anche contigue, sono diverse, diversissime. Quindi era necessario per noi trovare un punto di congiunzione che le riunisse tutte. Cioè noi non possiamo raccontare una storia generica, ma dobbiamo scendere nel dettaglio di un evento che è successo in quella valle. Ed è per questo che è nato poi il discorso del diorama vivente. Quindi il diorama vivente vuole rappresentare un punto, un momento piccolissimo in tutta la storia, che però è caratterizzato di quella zona lì. Quando si arriva sui luoghi, le voci che vengono rappresentate sono di solito l'americano, l'inglese, il tedesco, il partigiano e poi e anche i civili. Ad esempio, le scuole locali hanno importanza di capire da dove vengono e quindi loro possono riscoprire la storia del loro territorio attraverso anche queste forme, attraverso anche questi laboratori, perché fa parte della loro identità, fa parte dell'identità della comunità. Cioè il luogo, la localizzazione è fondamentale e meno interventi ci sono da un punto di vista di volerlo rendere un po' tipo Gardaland, ecco quello proprio perché toglie la suggestione, insomma. Quindi meno cartelli ci sono in giro e meglio è.
Massimo, thank you very much. And I'm not sure if you're listening to us now, but thanks for sharing your work with us. And from Italy now, we go further to the city of Pilsen. And Jan Engler was so kind to give us a short interview about digital events, in particular about the Liberation Festival last year. So, Jan, the word is for you.
The overall impression, we are surprised. Because for the very first time in the history of Liberation Festival, we had to cancel the classic forum and put it into the online format. We really didn't know what to expect. And in the end, it was a huge success. The reach was like maybe 50,000 online people and visitors. So we were pretty surprised. And my position, I was like the mediator in between the living history clubs, the veterans, taking their messages, videos, spots, and clips, and coordinating with the studio, to cut it, where to put it, who to put at the first place. The English one was running well, but we heard or we got some responses that the French one wasn't running at all. So we were checking this with the studio. We had feedback from our friends from Belgium or from France. They were just watching maybe the Czech version We are running on YouTube and on Facebook. And of course, there are people who are like handicapped who can come to visit Liberation Festival in person, or older people. So we have to find out a way how to present the Liberation Festival even to these people, because they are not used to follow Liberation Festival on internet, social media, etc. We were used to follow Liberation Festival in the classic format. So we hope that online version will be like additional part of the festival even for the future. We don't want to like recreate the Liberation Festival into the online space because for us the most important is to meet in person with people, to share stories, emotions, and shake hands. So we hope that the pandemic won't last for a long time. We would meet our friends from Normandy, from along the world, and the online version would be just, as mentioned, additional part, but integral part of the festival.
Thank you very much, Jan. And I also hope that we indeed will meet soon again to shake hands. And yes, Remy, we just reflected on very different topics in regards to sustainable tourism, but that also leads us to the next topic. And it means also reflecting to which kind of planet we are leaving towards our children and what is our legacy for the future generations regarding history. So are we on track?
Well, it's in our sector, the main aim is to transmit the history, the memory, and the stories of those who lived through the war, and to address the younger generation. And that's quite a challenge because this generation might feel disconnected with the topic. Mm-hmm. They don't have their parents or grandparents who lived through the war, so they don't have this living memory at home. They might also feel, oh, it's a long time ago, why don't we move on and forget about it and move forward. And they might not see why it's important to talk about it, the lessons that could be in there, and how it could help us for the present and the future. So I think this is of course central to us, especially in the context of veterans not being there anymore, or not eyewitnesses not being there anymore to tell their story and remind us why it is important to continue sharing those stories. So I think, yes, youngsters are essential, and it's a good transition with what Jan said in Pilsen. There are ways to interest them, and what they did in Pilsen with the Liberation Festival being full digital. I hope that it won't be the case in the future that we can meet, but still, there is an interesting experience here, forced experience because of COVID-19, as we do today. Those forced experiences are showing you also a way to interest younger audiences.
Actually, that will be the topic for the next some minutes. And therefore, we will start now also to listen and to hear and to see what the opinions of all the participants of the conference are. So now we will have the interactive part with the Mentimeter. So please go to the website menti.com, either by a second laptop or by a phone you have. And then the code is, and I hope you can see it here, 1223489. And also you can read it in the chat, and then we can interact with each other. You will get 4 questions, and perhaps, Remy, if I may ask you already, the first question is, should remembrance be entertaining in order to be relevant to younger generations? What do you think?
I think this is an essential topic. And I know later with Michael Dodds, we will talk about it. Where do we draw the line? Yeah. Where is it too much? Where is it going too far? Where it becomes Disneyland and it's not history and memory and education anymore. And that's where we need to be very, very clear about that. But also in museums, you need to find ways to interest this younger audience. I mean, to read long text, to be in front of mannequins and uniforms and guns without really seeing or understanding what it means. It's not going to the direction where we want to be. Yeah. So that's essential that we bring these experiences, that we bring of course all the technologies that we can, but with the limit, with a line which we need to draw, and that's sometimes a bit hard to see where is that line. I see and I saw certain initiatives which are a bit borderline, and we need to be very careful here and always remember why we do it. If we don't remember why we do it, then we can make big mistakes.
Yeah. I'm quite interested to see if there are already some first answers from the participants. Yes, there are. there are 32 saying that to some extent it should be entertaining. Actually, a
Well,
little bit what you're saying, it's reflecting that, or that it really should know the why we are doing it, and to a certain extent perhaps it's necessary, or? Yeah.
And to find indeed the limits between education and leisure. Educatement, it's some sort of a combination of education and entertainment, which is complicated to find. I know that very well.
So the second question is, to what extent would the following initiatives succeed in involving the younger generations in your country? And that can be either digital events, school trips, movies, in-person shows like concerts, light shows, historical, informative experiences, or reenactments. So and I think there's quite a clear answer at this moment, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think from the perspective of our foundation and the perspective of what we've done with the Liberation Route Europe, the message is it's great to read books and watch movies, please do that. But if you can, go to visit a museum, go to visit a cemetery, go to memorials, because when you go there, that's an experience that you never forget. Of course, you have these experiences when you go to camps, to Auschwitz, for example. Of course, this is something that stays with you. But it's also the same thing when you go to a cemetery, a German, an American, a French, a British cemetery. It's very sobering. And that's a memory that stays with you, and that has an impact. So I think visiting sites, traveling, education, I think it was educational travel.
Yeah.
Yes, this is very important to me.
And then the third one, why it's difficult to engage younger generations in remembrance culture. And also here we have 4 different answers. And here I can see that actually the answer so far as I can see it is a little bit, from everything a little bit, isn't it?
I think the first and last are quite connected, is how do we establish a connection to the events and the past, as long as we can, and that's, we don't have a lot of time, but maybe 5-10 years, when we can have eyewitnesses, when we can have veterans present to speak to students in school or during trips. This is something that we need to do and facilitate. We've done that in May with this campaign, I Remember. We had 26 veterans and eyewitnesses from 7 countries to speak to younger people, and we have 3 of them, I think, today, our LRE ambassadors are present. That was very beautiful to watch, and we had a 9-year-old kid from France talking to an eyewitness, and his father was in the resistance in Normandy, and at the end he said, well, next Sunday, call me and we will go together to the cemetery and we'll tell you a story. And this is exactly how it works and how you entrust people with these connections, I think.
Thank you, Remy. Yeah, how can the memory of World War II be perceived and passed on to younger generations in the next decades? And you can answer with a whole sentence or with a word, whatever you like. And here we can see already that a lot of recordings, interviews are one of the examples. Mm-hmm. And actually also what you said, go perhaps together with one who can tell about his history.
Sure, and I think also being actively involved in the remembrance. There are many examples. In many cemeteries, you have an adoption program. So if you are selected, then you are in charge of a grave and taking care of the grave and the story. And that's, for you, a way to be actively involved. At the LRE Foundation, we have a similar program, which is the Active Remembrance Youth Program, where we want to bring students from different countries together to build the Liberation Route Europe hiking trail and the vectors. So I think if you do that, actively involve them, then that's something that will stay with you and they become ambassadors for the future.
Yes, and Remy, I mean, there's a lot of creativity and ideas. I think we really have to keep that and have a look at it later on even more in detail. But I saw something about social media and storytelling and painting I saw, and art, visiting, of course, the spots to make it realistic. Yeah, and what do I see more? Creating LRE UK to educate children. Yeah, so
a lot of ideas for
a lot of
us.
ideas.
Yeah,
perhaps Remy, because it's the end also of our talk. A moment to have a more closer look at. Perhaps. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will see each other later on. Thank you all for participating in the Menti.com. Quite exciting, and we will have a look at it later on, even in more detail. And for now, then, thank you.
Thank you.
See you in a minute.
Thank you.
So speaking of the future, we also explore what we can be done to involve more the younger generations in remembrance and also the legacy we want to leave them. So we will do so considering different point of views, and therefore I'm very happy. Please welcome with me Lisette Matar, and also I would like to welcome Pieter van 't Hoog. Great that you are here. Thanks for your time. If I may introduce you, for those who haven't seen you 2 days ago signing a contract together, I'm very delighted that you're with me in the studio. Lisette Matar, Director of the Dutch Funds, a national fund for peace, freedom and veteran care. Fonds supports more than 200 projects that increase knowledge about war and emphasize the importance of the democratic and constitutional state and teach people the skills to make an active contribution themselves. That is very important and great. And Pieter van 't Hoog, great that you're here too. He is the provincial executive member of the province of Gelderland. And with Fonds and municipalities, province of Gelderland has invested millions of Europe in the Gelderland Remembers campaign. And now they are working on a new plan called Freedom to keep emphasizing the value of peace, freedom and democracy. Welcome, the two of you. May I start with the first question for both of you? I just had a nice introduction about where you stand for. So perhaps, what is your personal wish when we talk about the next generations? Pieter, may I ask you first?
Well, I think freedom is the heart of a democracy, of the society. So it's very important, but at the same time, you can never take it for granted. It needs explanation to see the meaning, the relevance from the history to the present and to the future. So very important.
Thank you. Lisette, what's your wish?
Yeah, as we all know, people now have no longer a personal relationship to what happened in the Second World War, or less and less. And my wish is for the future is that we find a relevant way to keep telling on these lessons. And these relevant ways will be different for different people. And it can be different forms, different ways, and I hope we will find it.
Actually, you are quite busy with different kind of projects. I already mentioned the more 200. Perhaps we can have a look at the first video. Perhaps it's about the international movie Battle for the Scheldt, the Forgotten Battle, powered by the Fonds. And the movie will be soon displayed in all cinemas. We have some fragments of it.
We're not giving ourselves up. If we do that, we're as good as dead.
Well, it's easy for you to say. You're going to die anyway.
Maybe. Not today.
Success of this operation lies in your hands, and with it the fate of Europe. Good luck.
Oh, impressive, Lisette. Fonds wants to increase the skills to actively contribute to a peaceful society in which then the younger people form an important target group actually for representatives of the future generations. Is this kind of movies an example of how you want to implement that?
Yeah, what we know from research is that the younger generation learns about history in school, and secondly, from a lot of the information comes via movies or cinema. And gaming is also an interesting mean to learn about the war. So when making this film, we tell a story that is not known to many people, and so they learn from it. And you see in this example a lot of violent parts of the movie. But the nice thing of the movies, of course, I've seen it myself already, is that it also tells, or you follow 3 young people during the war who have a very different perspective and make choices that have consequences. Well, so you really see the dilemmas of the 3 storylines, and I think that is really what is the most important part, maybe, from this film.
Sounds very appealing, and well, we are all looking forward to finally go to the movie again and the cinema. So hope to see it indeed soon. You have quite a lot of experience. I mean, more than 200 projects. What can we learn also from FEFONS and your work you're doing for involving younger people in the commemoration?
Now, I think Remy said this, I heard before. I think that younger people want to not only hear about and see about what has happened, but they will also want to own it, or they want to participate, or maybe they even want to co-create. And we see more and more interesting projects that, like that you can adopt a grave, but also we have a project that is called Adopteer een Monument, so you adopt a monument. But we see also, for example, an educational program that you go and look for stories in your neighborhood. It's called Oorlog in mijn buurt, War in my neighborhood. And what you see is that the people tell stories to the younger people, and the younger people really promise to tell on this story. So they own the story, they adopt the story. And I think those kind of projects make really children, young people, make it part of themselves. Of course, there are among those 200 different projects, all kind of other interesting projects where younger people are participating. For example, the Children Remembrance organized by Madurodam, now for a couple of years, where the children really make the remembrance, and they commemorate together on the 4th of May, the Second World War.
Is that we have also another small video of something you contributed to, and it's involving young people in the Bridge to Liberation experience. Directly after the official Market Garden commemoration in Arnhem, thousands of people, young and old, are all celebrating and move to the River Rhine for an open-air event with music, dance and storytelling. And here we have a short fragment of it.
De oorlog zit vol met tegenstrijdigheden.
Hoe om te gaan met de lessen die geleerd zijn, is het tentamen van nu.
Lisette, perhaps the last question from my side. I see that there are a lot of questions in the chat, huge interest. But how does the FEFONS support organization involving youngsters and improving education regarding values like freedom and democracy?
So we have a certain budget, and we hope that that nice initiative find us through the whole kingdom of the Netherlands. So we really want, for example, also the Caribbean to find us, etc. And we try to make a balanced whole of projects that make that all people feel connected to this topic, and that they learn from it both in skills and in knowledge, so that we can take this with us, the lessons from the Second World War and other wars. So.
Lisette, there is someone who said they really appreciate the work you are doing. And is there also similar funds in other countries? Do you know that?
Interesting question. To be honest, I haven't. I don't know, to be honest, if there are other organizations in other countries special focusing on this topic.
So perhaps to those person who has asked it, I'm sure that the Liberation LRE Foundation team will answer on it afterwards, and we will check that out. There was the question about adopting a monument. How successful has that been, that project? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, we do that, or it's a project of the National Committee for 4 and 5 May, and they address schools and ask them to participate. And it is a project that has been there for a lot of years already. So many schools just have it as part of their program, and I think that helps, because that makes it like part of the way the schools organize the weeks before 4 May. So I think it's quite successful. So the children know about the monument. They go there on the 4th of May. They do a project about it. They put flowers there. So yeah, it's quite successful.
Thank you very much, Lisette, and thumbs up and good luck further with the work you're doing. Peter, in Gelderland there are also quite a lot of experience you already made with different ways of commemorate and involving young people in commemoration. So what can we learn from you? What kind of experiences have you made where we can all make use of?
Well, yes, we are exploring. I will not say we have the answer, because it takes different ways. And one of the main things we found out is we shouldn't think for the young generation, but just talk with them and listen to their answers, what they find important. For example, 1 month before the COVID lockdown, Nijmegen, one of the historical cities nearby, organized a free future festival, and a lot of students all from Gelderland took part, and they had debates and they just talked with each other. What is the meaning of freedom? What's the meaning for you personally? What do you learn from the history? What is relevant today? And that's brought a couple of interesting ideas. For example, in the border region, young people find it very obvious and normal to commemorate and celebrate together with the German peers. And they develop common programs, Dutch-German programs. Well, you learn a lot when you listen to the young generation themselves. So we explore, we try to listen and find good ways. We are still busy with that. So again, we don't have the answer. I think there are many answers, but it is important.
Thank you, Peter. And something about why freedom is so important to you, I will ask you also in a minute. But perhaps let's first have a look. You also brought a small fragment of a video with you from the province of Gelderland, as we know, has a very important role to commemorate and remember the 75 years of after the World War II. And one of the main events was the lighting of the Freedom Fire in Wageningen, in the Dutch city of liberation. And in 2020, unfortunately, an almost empty square, but let's have a look.
Vrijheid vluchten. Ik kan geen vuur van onderdrukking zijn. Gelukkig, het tij keerde. Zij waren het. Zij voelden zich geroepen omdat ze in mij geloofden. In de vrijheid.
So Peter, why is freedom so important to you?
Well, as I said, for me it's the heart of our society, of our democracy. And it has been given to us in the liberation with big sacrifices, and it needs to be passed on to the next generation with the meaning of freedom for their own lives in the present times, in the future times. So we have a lot of places in Gelderland which remember us to the war. We all know the stories of a bridge too far, the Battle of Arnhem, the mistaken bombing of Nijmegen, a capitulation signing in Wageningen. But what we feel it's important that it's not just a history lesson, but we take the lessons of the history.
Oh, that's very nice said, indeed. Perhaps the last question, if I may shortly ask you. You're doing quite a lot of things in commemorating World War II and celebrating peace, but beside funding the many projects you're doing, how is the province of Gelderland stimulating this further on?
Well, what we have, we are facilitating the plans, the ideas that come from the municipalities, from the inhabitants. That's our primary goal. And besides, we also try to facilitate our visitors, because there are a lot of musea, cemeteries, places with that history, carrying the war history, and we think that that's are the tools that we can use to bring their heritage to the next generations and the visitors.
Thank you very much. Thank both of you for having and taking the time for sharing with us the projects you're doing. And now we go on to Michael Dodds, actually, from Gelderland to Normandy. I would like to welcome Michael Dodds online, connected with us here. And he is director of the Normandy Tourism Board. Regarding World War II remembrance tourism, Normandy is the most important region in Europe, I have to say, with between 5.5 and 6.5 million tourists every year. So we are very curious about Normandy's remembrance policy for the future. Hi, Michael. Great to see you. Great to have you here. We already heard from Lisette and from Peter about their investments and what they are doing, the different projects. So what's your plan in the Normandy?
Well, we obviously have been tackling the same questions. What is the best way of commemorating the anniversary of the Battle of Normandy on the 6th of June every year? And I think we're on a good line in that for the last 3 years we have organized a World Peace Forum in Normandy at the Abbaye aux Dames in Caen, with the intention of really promoting Normandy as permanently associated with the values of liberty and peace, but also to try and establish the fact that all that sacrifice was not just the liberation of Europe, but for encouraging peace and liberty generally throughout the world. So we invite people from across the world, politicians, academics, strategists, researchers, as well as, obviously, you can imagine, we try to involve as much as possible our local schools as well and national schools to simply debate issues regarding the conditions required for peace and the peacemakers in the future. There is an ambition for us to become the Davos for peace in Normandy. The ambition is quite high, but so far so good. We have, each year we manage to enrich the conference program and develop the number of attendees to over 3,000-4,000. And even in 2020, a very difficult year for us all, we managed a hybrid version, both physical and virtual. And we're slowly but surely generating an enthusiasm for this project and a whole movement, Normandy for Peace. We've even managed to have the support of the European Commission to have a Normandy Index for Peace, a general benchmarking exercise where we work with researchers on actually establishing a benchmark that monitors the conditions for peace around the world. So we are trying both to, we're being ambitious, but slowly but surely we're getting support for that ambition. We would love as well, and we are trying that as well, to have a more popular element to commemorating the 6th of June. And we've started encouraging local people in Normandy and Normans around the world to actually hold a picnic for peace on the 6th of June, where people can simply get together, source some good Norman products which work well for picnics, to simply invite people and their friends and their entourage to actually have a nice convivial moment together.
Michael, I can hear, actually, sorry to interrupt you, but I hear that you have plenty of plans, which sounds great to me. And thank you very much for sharing a lot of the plans you have and also the ambitions you have. Perhaps may I ask you another question, because I think we heard a lot about it already today. But how do you see the commemorative events evolves? Now we are going to a future, actually, without eyewitnesses and with a youth which can feel disconnected from the topic.
How do we manage to promote and present history without eyewitnesses? Is that your question?
Yes, that's a short summary. Good one. Yes.
Well, we're trying very hard to work. As you can imagine, there's a whole plethora of museums in Normandy dedicated to the subject, and for the last 15 years, we've been attempting to encourage different museums to collect oral testimony and improve their interpretation techniques. And the regional council has tried to find money to help encourage the museums and improve their interpretation. I have to admit, 10, 15 years ago, there was a fairly mixed bag of both private museums and local authority museums and other establishments that were firmly funded on our research. It was a fairly mixed bag, but 15 years later, I think that there's a greater uniformity in the approach and the way we present the Battle of Normandy story to visitors for its collecting museums. But having said that, it's a never-ending subject.
No, I think we could talk for hours, and I mean, it's so interesting what you're saying. I'm so sorry to interrupt you a little bit on that, but I have a last question for you, which is a little bit sensitive, but still I would like to ask you, because we talked already with Remy a little bit about where is actually the way how to deal with it, since there are different controversial projects which raised questions among historians and also veterans and their families, as well as educators. And I'm interested in your opinion, where to draw the line. I mean, we have seen different projects, amongst others, the called Tribute to the Heroes, but there are many more projects. And so therefore, where to draw the line? What is your opinion about that?
I think that it's completely normal that 76 years on, we have this question, and we want to try and encourage young audiences to still be engaged and understand what happened and be concerned about the values of liberty and freedom that was the cause of, which is the thing that motivates us all. We are in a situation in Normandy where we are faced now by private investors that want to invest in the latest in terms of audiovisual technology to try and present the Battle of Normandy story. And I think that it's normal that we receive these types of requests and these types of projects. I think that as soon as a project is divorced or is separated from the educational programs or the ambitions of a particular museum or well-established cultural establishment, if it's purely a private sector investment, it becomes more problematic. Because there you're on a very fine line, and the demands and requirements for a historical caution is the word we use in French, and caution, you have to have proper scientific and historical approval for the project, then becomes all the more acute. And this is what we have at the moment in Normandy, where there is a very interesting and important investment that is being developed, which is being done purely by private investors. And the regional council, in accommodating their ambitions, has to make sure that they respect very strict criteria in the way they go about the project, the way that the scenography is done, and the way that the project is delivered. It's a fine line between something that could be fantastic and enlarges the audience, something that could be a flop and would actually be detrimental to the image of the region. It's a very fine line. Yeah. And as soon as it's a project of this nature, it's separated from a major museum institution, it becomes more sensitive, it becomes more problematic.
Thank you, Michael, also for being so open in answering these very sensitive topic, perhaps. Thank you very much. I send lovely greetings to the Normandy. I hope soon that we will be able to visit and that I can enjoy the coast as you are doing at the Normandy. Thank you very much, Michael, and have a nice evening. Thank you. Well, we have seen actually the people working on making the memory transition possible. We have had a lot of different perspective, also from Lisette and from Peter. Thank you so much for that. But now let's go back actually to a veteran, Mervyn Kirch. He's 95 years old and he did an interview with us today. Mervyn Kirch was part of the UK infantry. At just 19 years old, Mervyn was among the first officers to land on Gold Beach on the Normandy on D-Day. Now, more than 76 years later, Mervyn has a very important message for us, and let's listen to what he has to say.
I'd like World War II to be remembered as completely different from all other wars. That's the first thing. I personally like future generations to remember the ordinary men and women who risked and often gave their lives to help overthrow the most evil philosophy man has ever dreamed up. That would be my legacy. It seems to me that the age of reading books is passing. Everything has to be photograph or visual. When I talk to schools, I see children, I use a screen and I see that the children prefer the pictures, graphs, artifacts from that to my actual words. I find that they were more interested. Pilgrimages are very evocative, where possible, and the top place would be the British Normandy Memorial at Versailles and the Normandy beaches where the liberation began. The liberation route through Western Europe and the training and assembling sites in the UK are wonderful ideas and focus for the reconstruction of the determination and perseverance of every Allied soldier to destroy the forces of evil and to liberate people they didn't even know. Key battle sites on that route to Berlin will also focus attention all along that route and give opportunities for remembrance locally. I hope that there will still be some veterans left to join on that route. When I was very young, every cinema performance was started with a short film, very short film, of a cowboy sitting on a horse singing a song. It was put on by an evangelical group called the Oxford Group. I remember that. I was only about 7 or 8 by then. It was a man sitting on a horse singing this song, if I may be permitted to sing it. Me am a wise old horsey, at times I've heard him say, the trouble with the world is the people who live in it. They've all learned to get, but they've never learned to give in it. You'll never build a world, a decent sort of world. You'll never build the world that way. That was nearly 100 years ago, and it made a deep impression on me. I hope it will on all your listeners. The world starts with me, not with them. That's the way to improve the world.
Well, dear Mervyn, I have to say I'm very much impressed by you. And thank you for these special words. And I think for all of us, your assignment is more than clear. We need to keep involving the younger generations in remembering the sacrifices you and all the other veterans made to regain peace and freedom. Thank you very much. So, one of the most impressive commemorations in the Netherlands is the Sunset March in Nijmegen, a daily tribute to the Allied soldiers who fought for the liberation of the Netherlands, especially to those soldiers who lost their lives. Each and every night, a military veteran walks the Sunset March along the new bridge over the River Waal. 48 Allied soldiers lost their lives during the Waal crossing, and at sunset, these sets of street lights are lit up pair by pair at a slow marching pace. So meanwhile, the Sunset March has taken place over 2,300 times. Today, actually, it's 2,308 times. So now on another day, I head over to Joël. Joël, where are you right now? What have you been done?
The bridge at Oversteek, but we had an interview with Maya Bruls about this incredible event, and we are now almost starting to walk here the Sunset March.
I'm here together with Mayor Bruls in the city of Nijmegen. Mayor, I'm going to participate tonight in the Sunset March. What is the Sunset March for Nijmegen?
Well, the Sunset March is an initiative of military veterans, Dutch military veterans who are living here in the city and in the region. And they've decided to walk every night at sunset across the bridge. The bridge has 48 light poles, which are specially designed as a lasting commemoration for those who died at the historic action, the crossing back in September 44.
Can it grow, this initiative, like something, the famous last post in Ypres?
Well, perhaps it sure would be very good if it could be a long-lasting tradition. It's not only seeing or hearing people talk about commemoration and commemorative events, but you're taking part yourself in the commemoration. That makes this walk, this crossing, very, very special. And I guess that's the main part while they're still walking, while they're still going across the river every night.
And Nijmegen is a city with lots of history, like the bombardments, but also lots of fighting for the bridges. Mm-hmm. How important is it for you as a mayor to keep this history alive?
To my humble opinion, there is no future when you're not aware of what happened in the past. And many people, even people who didn't live during the war years, who aren't aware of the experience for themselves, but are very much aware of what it meant to their parents, their grandparents, and we can learn of it. So it's very important to stand still by it. And the beautiful thing about the Sunset March is it's every day, and everybody can take part. I think it's very special and very important. We are commemorating. So it's more history which we have to keep alive by telling stories, and there that gives you a basis to learn from and get on to the future.
Thank you very much. Well, Remy, talking about the Sunset March, perhaps before we go back to Joël again, may I ask you shortly, why is it so important to you to show the attendees of the conference what's about the Sunset March?
What I love about the Sunset March is it's something that is organized every day. I feel that seeing that commemoration is not once a year. It's not on the 6th of June in Normandy. It's not only 1 week in September here in the Netherlands, or the 8th of May for the end of the war. It can be every day, and I'm very moved every time I do that with them, because you have groups of veterans, you have youngsters, cadets sometimes, to take that walk, and that's very moving. So indeed, commemoration can be every day.
So let's see how it looks like today. So Joël, where are you?
Hello, I'm still here at Oversteek, here in Nijmegen. Very cold, -5 I think, and we have also some technical problems because of the cold. But as you can see, Tim is waiting for the lights to start, and then he's going to walk over the Oversteek.
Well, it's I heard the 2003 and 8 time for the Sunset March today. Impressive.
Yeah, really impressive. And he told me 2 days ago, because of the snowstorms, still the veterans go to the Oversteek to participate in the Sunset March. So it is amazing. Also now it's really cold, but still Tim is doing the walk. He's now ready, and he's now walking, as you can see.
Well, then please say hello to Tim and tell him also that we are walking with him in our thoughts, and I'm sure all attendees of the conference are doing the walk together with you today. So it will be a very special day. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Very impressive, very emotional, also very important to do it. And Remy, we are now heading up for the end of the LRE conference. We took a little bit more time, but it was also quite important to raise up all the topics, to really go into exchange with each other. A digital event. You probably wouldn't have thought so last year, but now if you look back towards the role of the World War II, towards what we face in today's challenges, and also what we have talked about the three different topics for today, what actually will you take with you, and what would you like to share?
Well, I think what Mervyn Kirsch said, it's a great conclusion. The world starts with us, meaning that we are in charge and we're responsible for our world and the world of the future. So this would be my main takeaway. And I know it is digital, so we have to shorten it a little bit. In real life, it would have been a full day, probably, program, with more time to reflect with our guests and discuss and ask questions and so on. And I really hope that next year we can do it in person and have these 2 days together and not only an hour and a half.
So actually, that would be indeed my question. 2022, there will be a next LRE Forum, and you are planning it to do it somewhere?
Absolutely.
You already know?
It's an annual event, of course. So we want to do it again in February or March 2022. Hopefully, the pandemic will be partially gone or gone completely, hopefully, with the vaccine. And in that case, we will do it in person and maybe use also this experience of today to maybe do it hybrid. About the location, it's a bit of a secret. There are discussions, ongoing discussions. I'm not going to disclose that information, but very soon we will be able to, and fingers crossed that we can do it in person.
I've crossed my fingers, Remy, for sure. Last moment, would you like to say something I haven't asked you yet, or what you would like to tell our attendees of the conference today?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for being the host of this event today and also yesterday.
Thank you.
This is the end of 3 days with our members, with the travel trade partners, today with all the network being present online. So I want to thank them as well for participating. I hope it was a nice thing of their week, every day coming back to us at the end of the day to have some great information about our work, about the topic of the memory transmission. So I want to thank them. I want to thank also the ones who supported us, Tourism Veluwe Arnhem-Nijmegen, the province of Gelderland, also the Veefonds. They were present today, yesterday, and the day before. So I really want to thank them and thank everyone who agreed to participate. So it's a lot of thank you, but I'm very grateful because it's been really a great 3 days. It's been a challenge, of course, to do it like this in COVID restrictions and avoiding each other with a mask and the gel. But in the end, it was a brilliant event. And so thank you, everyone, and thank you, Anouk.
And we see here the Sunset March live at this moment, Tim and Joël with -5. And we will see, I think, later on the lights also. So perhaps I will wrap up. Is that okay? Then may I thank all of you, of course, all the attendees who kept with us a little bit longer. Thank you for your patience, and we hope that we could contribute and give you some new insights and some interesting different topics and perspectives on our responsibility and about inequality and sustainability and the future generations. I would like to thank all the experts for sharing with us their wisdom and their tips and their thoughts and their initiatives they are doing. And also, I would like to thank the youth ambassadors for being part today, so interactive. Thanks for your great questions, also in the chat. And I would like to thank, of course, the whole team behind the screen. They made so much work. I mean, I can see them here in the studio, also behind the camera. Thank you so much. A big applause for you. It was an exceptional LRE Forum, the first time in a digital version, hopefully next year again, face-to-face somewhere in the world. Remy will tell it soon, I think so. So to all of you, let me say thank you, dankjewel, merci beaucoup, muchas gracias, grazie und dankeschön on behalf of the LRE Foundation, the Province of Gelderland and Toerisme Veluwe Arnhem and Nijmegen. See you soon, and I would like to wrap up with the motto of the LRE Foundation: to remember the past is to create a better future.
Let's say goodbye with a smile, dear, just for a while, dear, we must part. Don't let this parting upset you.